Good afternoon. My name's Paul Vaughan. This is my wife Emma. We're the parents of Millie Vaughan, who you see in some of the photos we have running a slideshow behind us. They'll be running continuously, just showing pictures of things we went through, the trip to Jacksonville itself, and what we were doing. For those that haven't read the brief introduction, Millie was diagnosed around about 18 months old with optic glioma. Began a intensive case of treatment of chemotherapy. Lasted about 18 months. We had a year of stability where the tumour didn't grow. Then unfortunately in the summer of 2010 recurrent MRIs told us that the tumour was then growing again. Started initially with chemotherapy, as it had been so successful in the first instance. Unfortunately she was non-responsive to the chemotherapy. So we were then referred to the CCLG for proton therapy in Jacksonville, Florida. Fortunately, Millie was accepted, and the rest is kind of history, really. We travelled over there in April of last year. She had around about 30 treatments at the Proton Centre, and then we came back start of July. I'll pass you on to Emma now to tell you a little bit more about what we went through.
Yeah. Millie was accepted to have her treatment at the Florida Centre, the UFPTI in Jacksonville. We had 4 weeks to prepare while everything was sorted out, and we had a small sort of fundraising going on before we left, just that we knew even if we were accepted by the NCG to cover everything with the NHS funding, we would need money to cover expenses and our unpaid leave from work and what have you. So we raised funds in the sort of 4 weeks while we were waiting to hear from the NCG. That's a horrible time to wait to find out what's going to happen, whether your child's going to be accepted and what have you. Mark Williams at UCLH was our coordinator, and he arranged all of the flights and the accommodation and liaised frequently with the social worker at Florida. He also gave us details for a family who were there going through the process while we were waiting to find out, which was very helpful, really, because they could give us a lot of information that only a family going through it can sort of know about. We had sort of unsure feelings about staying in the Ronald McDonald House, which is the accommodation which is provided to every family that goes to the Florida unit anyway, as long as they have rooms available. That's where you start off your experience. So we had a few sort of misgivings about that, communal living and what have you, and spoke to the family that were out there at the time, and they gave us some advice and information which was very helpful. But we agreed with Mark that we'd start off at Ronald McDonald's and see how we found it. So we flew out on the 16th of April with US Airways, and although we knew we would have to change flights once, we thought this would be okay if we could arrive directly into Jacksonville. However, it was a nightmare. We landed in Charlotte in North Carolina and had to go through US border control, recheck our luggage, get through security again, and catch the flight to Jacksonville all within 45 minutes. Needless to say, this was impossible. We had to run with Millie in her buggy and all of our hand luggage to the gate. When we got there, they were just bolting the doors. We'd missed the flight. Nobody around to advise us what to do. So we had to check the board to see for any other flights going to Jacksonville. Found one remaining flight of the day, ran to that gate, begged to be put on standby, and managed to get the last 3 seats on that flight. Eventually arriving in Jacksonville very late, managed to find our car hire place and get to the hotel that we'd stay in overnight. We hoped this would be the moment where we could drop everything and flake out and relax after our interesting journey. However, they didn't have our names on their system, and due to our late arrival and the UK time difference, we didn't have anybody to contact to sort this out. As we were there, we heard the lovely tones of a Scottish accent. There was a family who walked into reception just as we were in total panic, and they became very good friends while we were there. Their little boy went through his treatment process the same time as Millie, and they gave us lots of information and advice. Eventually everything was sorted out, and we went on the following day to the Ronald McDonald House. I'll let you know about that.
Ronald McDonald House, fantastic facility. It's in the city centre and it's over the road from the main paediatric hospital in the Moors, where most of the children have their routine checkups and chemotherapy if required. It really is a lovely place. It's got large ensuite rooms. It's over 3 floors, massive kitchen diner for communal eating, laundry rooms, TV lounges, playroom, computer room, teenager room if your children are older, a courtyard with play equipment. Each family's got their own storage space in the kitchen, so if you have your own food, there's plenty of room for you to keep it. And there's a large, well-stocked larder, which is generously donated by local businesses, companies, etc. Each evening, members from the local community groups, various different organisations come in and try and cook a meal for everybody. Not every evening, but most evenings, which is fantastic. People donate their time, food, everything. For everyone to share, basically. Food and drink's not allowed, unfortunately, in the bedrooms, which is quite difficult for many, especially if you want to go and chill out in your own space. There are rules and regulations around the Ronald McDonald House which are suitable for some, but other people find them a bit restrictive. And like I said, it is a fantastic place. The people there are all wonderful. The facilities are wonderful. Unfortunately for us, we just weren't keen on the communal living side of it. We were then... we'd spoken to Mark Williams before we went, and we thought we'd give it a try because there are other benefits from being in amongst other families. The support that you get from those other people is essential, I think, and we wanted to at least spend some time there to talk to other people and see how they got on in that situation. Everything there was great. We decided it wasn't really for us, and through Katie, which was a social worker at UFPTI at that time, we organised with her the chance to find somewhere else for us to stay. She put us in touch with a couple of real estate people, one being Suncastle Properties, and we managed to find a place down at Pontevedra Beach. There was the way up between, do we find somewhere close to the hospital and cut down the waiting times but not be such a nice area, or go out to the beach? We opted for staying down at Pontevedra Beach. Gave us a 40-minute drive into Jacksonville city centre for the treatment, but the benefits we thought were fantastic, really, and that was what we opted to do. We stayed 3 days at Ronald McDonald House. We would have stayed longer, but they're so quick in allocating real estate over there and rental properties that 3 days, we said, well, we discussed it with each other, decided it wasn't for us, and in the process of then talking to Katie, within a day or so we were there and moved into a new accommodation, which was a beautiful place down on Sawgrass Golf and Country Club, which is quite a famous place. We didn't realise at the time, but a beautiful place, and that's where we went from there.
We had 2 weeks prior to starting Proton, which was fantastic, really, for getting our bearings and settling in. In that 2 weeks prior to actually starting the treatment course, you have all of the appointments at the other appointed hospitals that the UFPTI use. That's Nemours for oncology appointments and just a general overview. You meet with a consultant there every few weeks just to check how everything's going, and bring up anything that sort of comes up with your child aside from Proton issues. There's also Wolfson's, which is a fantastic children's hospital centre. Millie had her surgery there within those 2 weeks to have the fiducial markers inserted, which are used as the directional indicators for the proton beams. And she also had to have an MRI under general anaesthetic so that they could sort of get their planning done accurately. And at the proton unit, Millie had to have her proton mask made, which is this one here, which when you first see this on your child, it's not very nice. And this shows where her beams were for her proton. So she had 3 entry sites directly to her glioma, which sits on the centre of her optic nerves. And they also make the lens here, which is like a big sort of perspex thing. Now, Millie's tumour is about the size of the sort of base of this lens. And again, this is what they put you'll have seen some of the photos of her in the proton room. This goes at the front of the beam machine and directs the beam directly at the tumour. So she had all of that done. And then we met Dr. Danny, Mr. Superstar. We had a consultation with him, and Millie was taken with Kim, the wonderful play specialist over there. The meeting with Dr. Danny is probably the toughest consultation that we've been through, isn't it? We went into the process of proton believing it to be the best treatment available with minimum side effects. And we had naively thought that Millie's tumour was quite small and unobtrusive. We'd of course discussed treatment and side effects and what have you with Dr. Gaze, and the sort of difference between normal radiation and proton. But obviously we'd done our research, we'd looked at case studies and seen all the positive things from it, and had the blinkers on, I think, thinking that this was what was needed for our child. This was going to be the treatment.
Which at the end of the day, I suppose it is, but radiotherapy is radiotherapy, and whichever way you look at it, there's always going to be side effects. So.
But yeah, Danny firstly explained the size of Millie's tumour and the involvement with other structures around the tumour or the close proximity to other key structures in the brain. We, at that point, didn't really have an idea of the size of Millie's tumour. The last picture we had actually seen in a consultation was 3.5 years prior, during Millie's first chemo cycle. Now, that's our fault. We should have, asked to look, but you're guided by the professionals, and you just sort of carry along. Anyway, Dr. Danny showed us the image of the MRI scan they'd taken at Wolfson's, and all I can say is a steam train straight into the room, virtually knocking us both off our seats. Then it got worse. He explained about what could be affected and how, percentages of risks, the risk of loss of sight, more in one eye than the other, hearing loss, more in one side than the other, brainstem damage, pituitary and hypothalamus damage, hormone deficiency, and so on. Needless to say, we wondered why we were there and were ready to come home. We didn't know what to do. We were ready to leave, expressed our concerns to Danny, and just sort of discussed it with other families that were there, and they'd had exactly the same experience. And I think in America they're very much based around a litigation culture, so they tell you worst case scenario, and Dr. Danny did sort of go on to explain that. And once we'd sort of caught up with ourselves and reaffirmed why we were there, we went ahead with everything. So Millie's treatment schedule was to be 30 treatments, 1 treatment a day, 5 days a week for 6 weeks, with a couple of breaks here and there due to bank holidays and what have you. And Millie was still too young to keep still, so she had to have general anaesthetics and was under for about 45 minutes every day. This filled us with dread, as Millie is notorious for being problematic with her anaesthetics. However, they're very adept at the whole anaesthetic procedure over there, and she would go in talking and laughing without even knowing they were giving her anaesthetic, and fall asleep laughing. So within a week she was looking forward to going to sleep, falling asleep laughing, and waking up, and as soon as they wake up there, they are allowed to eat and drink straight away. So that was a bonus for Millie.
We found it very different on a lot of levels there. Obviously at UFPTI, they're dedicated to doing that one thing. You're going there for proton therapy, so therefore everything's like a conveyor belt, everything is one process. Obviously, if we go to a hospital here, Great Ormond Street, for instance, there are hundreds of different things going on around, and I don't think it's quite as easy to concentrate on that one specific thing. So for her general anaesthetic, it was such a routine for them and such a routine for Millie that it was over and done with quickly, dealt with quickly, and for her, she became used to it, and it improved her for when she came back to this country and has had general anaesthetic since, to be honest with you.
it was during the time that Millie had treatments that we'd scuttle off and get a coffee and hit the computer room to get onto Facebook and catch up with everybody at home. And before we'd gone, I'd done a little bit of research to try and find out, was there anything around on the internet for proton support, which there wasn't. So I set up proton therapy support group, which is now up to 120 members. Our original members from Jacksonville are still on there, and we provide sort of ongoing support and advice to people going out for proton. And we now have probably half of our members now are also patients, families that are going to the Oklahoma site as well. So it's a really, really good group. And our experience as a whole was very positive. Millie was lucky in that she wasn't having chemo at the same time. Most of the children were, which left them very unwell through the whole process. But as Mark Gazer said, Florida sunshine and orange juice, and we had a very positive time, wonderful experience. Days out at local attractions, the beaches, baseball games, sitting on our porch on our condo watching the alligators, the osprey, everything. It was just wonderful.
Yeah, it's not to belittle facilities here. It's just such a different world out there, and you almost become, I feel, a little bit guilty for enjoying what some people might perceive as almost a 3-month holiday. I wish it was a holiday, because then we wouldn't have had to go through the other stuff we were going through. But I think with everything else that's going on there, and the staff and the actual area itself, it changes your perception, and you have to enjoy it. And we found specifically that because we had spoken to Hayley Shave before we went, and she told us they tried to do something every weekend. So we followed that protocol, as you were, and did something every single weekend. Millie was de-accessed from her. She's got a portacath and was accessed on Monday, de-accessed Friday. So therefore, the whole weekend we could do whatever we want. And we specifically made a time to do something every weekend, which just made the time flow and made everything just a little bit easier. Give her a chance to enjoy the beach and her a chance to enjoy things. Which is what she needed, really, because she was the one going through it, not us. Although we had our own sort of worries, Millie was the one going through it, and we wanted to try and make the experience for her as less unpleasant as possible. We're
very wary as well that we were lucky, and as you'll have seen from the photos, we had many visitors come out from the UK, and that was a huge help. The NHS cover the funding for the child and 2 parents or accompanying adults. They don't pay for siblings, and that was one of the main issues with most of the families there that had siblings. One parent had to stay at home with the sibling, or perhaps a parent couldn't get leave, and those families where it was just the one parent and the one child really, really suffered. And so sort of being able to help them as much as possible was a bonus for us, having such a positive experience. We wanted to help others that weren't having, such an easy time of it. So at the end of Proton as well, we allowed some extra time, and you'll have seen we did Disney and what have you. Lots of help from UK charities to do that. And we had some big events, the royal wedding and what have you over there, and managed to see a flare of the shuttle launch in the distance from our porch. We saw the last space shuttle launch from Cape Canaveral, so that was really good. But as I say, the charities that helped, Click Sergeant actively helped with sort of financial areas, CCLG for information, and we know that they're actively trying to get more information together, which we've been helping where we can to try and input with that. Coming back from Proton again was really tough, wasn't it? Yeah. Trying to come back, as you say, from Florida sunshine and lovely beaches, from a massive condo to our little 3-bedroom box house, took some getting used to. And getting back into work, and 3 months is a long time to be away from home, and we really did make our place in Florida our home. So it's quite a time to adapt when families come back from America, and I think having a sort of meeting with the UK team when you come back is quite helpful as a sort of debrief almost. And I know we saw Dr. Gaze and sort of talked over our experience, which is very helpful. And the children are very much affected as well because they have a big chunk of time that they've missed from school and what have you. So that's a big impact. But
Millie especially, she lost out most of her first year one at school, which is where they start developing all their friendships and close associates, and for her to miss out that period, coming back for her was difficult, and she has had a difficult time since we've come back with dealing with children of her own age group. She can deal with the older children in the school because they've had a lot more experience in life and know what's going on, and she can deal with the younger ones because they've got no idea and Millie can mother them, but her own specific age group she has struggled with. But that's...
Generally she's doing really well though. I mean, we've her latest scan reports show that her tumour and the cyst around the tumour have shrunk slightly, which is very, very encouraging. We've had a couple of blips, but we seem to be on a good tangent of good results. So no endocrine concern. It's like we stick her in a grow bag every night because she hasn't stopped growing since we've got back. So for us, she's doing very well. Again, we're aware of a few cases where it's not going so well. But I think since returning, as I say, we've tried to help get some information together for families. And I'd say our top tips would be having a sat-nav if you're going to drive, being in touch with people at home using Skype and what have you. It really makes the time pass a bit more easily. Join the Facebook support group. Of course, I'm championing that as that's my little baby.
And that's not just families, that's anyone...
Professionals, families, anybody to help link up information. Making your accommodation out there, your home, making time for trips out and what have you, attending family support meetings out there. We try to set up outings and what have you, and using the Facebook group works actually out in Florida as well. People can arrange days out and what have you. Being aware that food in supermarkets isn't as cheap as you may think, so eating out is quite good value.
Very, very different way of life in the States. It seems that if you want to go to the supermarket and buy yourself a nice large steak to put in the barbie for tea...
Not that we look like we like steak.
It seems to be actually cheaper to go out to a restaurant and have someone cook it for you. And because portions are so large in the States, take a plastic tub with you because that's what everyone does. Take what you don't eat home, and that's lunch for the next day sorted. So although it might seem, in the scheme of things, the price may be similar for a meal out there as it is here, it actually works out cheaper because 9 times out of 10, that's 2 meals, not just one. And, you know, that was difficult to understand and difficult to explain to people when you come back from there. It's easy enough when you go on holiday. If you go on holiday to the States for 2 weeks, you're going out for meals all the time anyway. When you're there for 3 months and living a life... you see what the prices are in the shops and everything else. And yeah, clothes can be cheap and other electronic goods can be cheap, but food, for some reason, is more expensive to buy at the supermarket than it is in a lot of cases to go to a restaurant. Especially if you can find a $5 all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet. And then, needless to say, I found a few of those.
The other things are practical things, buying the pay-as-you-go mobiles out there. You have a lot of phone calls daily between the Proton Centre and yourselves, sorting out your gantry times and what have you. So things like that, having cash available as opposed to travellers' cheques for your first few days.
Also with the phones, for phoning back to the UK, people tend to, because we all have our own mobiles now, you go off to the States and think, well, I can use it anywhere in the world, I'll just keep using it. And when you come home to a £1,500 phone bill, it's not quite so entertaining. That's an extreme example. Yeah. If you buy the phones out there, even in Walmart, a lot of them will do very cheap international calls. So find one of those, get your own mobile out there for phone calls to the Proton Centre and also for phone calls back to the UK, massively reduce your costs.
I think as well, going back to the terrible US Airways journey, we'd say research flight options and have a real think about who you want to fly with and what route you want to take. In hindsight, we would have driven up from Orlando to Jacksonville and done it that way.
Which is suitable for us. We're quite confident drivers, so we're
Yeah.
quite happy to do that. And I've driven in the States before as well. Might not be so. It is a 2-hour journey. All right, it's virtually just 2 roads from Orlando up to Jacksonville, but for us it would be the easier option. For other people, just look at the different routes. There are a lot of alternative routes flying from the UK to Jacksonville. Unfortunately, although they call it Jacksonville International, it doesn't seem to go international. It just flies around America.
And I think finally what we have realised coming back is that everyone's had a very different experience. There's no sort of standardised format between different areas in the UK, and so some families go out there knowing a lot, what the NHS allows them financially, what is covered. Other families go out totally clueless. So I think sort of a pulling together of information is key for an ongoing sort of standardised process across the UK. And I don't know, I mean, we've sort of, as I say, the support group is excellent with 120 members now, which shows you how many families are currently going or have been in the last year. But possible proton focus groups dotted across the country would be helpful for sort of debriefs and, as I say, standardising everything so everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet. And a sort of standardised follow-up. Obviously, every case is unique, but many families query, why has that person had that test? We haven't had that test, and who's entitled to this, who isn't? So I think, you know, that's key. And obviously warning families of the direct approach of the consultants over in America, because that was the biggest thing for us, wasn't it? So
It was something we just weren't expecting, and I think for anyone going, any parents that are going, and if you're giving information to parents that are going, they need to be aware of that, because it was quite terrifying for us. And we have some knowledge of what's going on. Emma's a nurse, and she has some medical knowledge. So even for her to be terrified, it was quite unsettling for us. But that's the problem when you're living in a litigation society. If you don't tell people the worst case scenario, they're going to come back and sue you if something happens. And unfortunately, this country's probably going that same way. But yeah, it would be useful for people to know that. But apart from that, really, that's our experience. Mostly positive, some negatives, but
and we
that's
loved
life,
it so much. In less than 2 weeks, we're flying back and we're going for our year's review with Dr. Danny. That every family that goes is invited to go for a review a year after treatment, but that has to be financed yourself. So we've been saving furiously over the last few months to be able to do that, and looking forward to it very much. Even going back to our condo on Sawgrass. So
some of us are looking forward to seeing Dr. Danny more than others, but you know. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us.